Play out of Brother Ray's playbook and just took the Bible and said, okay, Lord, what do I need to do? And I let it fall open. And it fell open to the very familiar story of Paul when, shipwreck and snake bitten. And I began to read those. That whole ordeal, when people talk about it, or we talk about it, it seems like it can be summed up in just 2 or 3 verses and it's over with. But it is actually a long, drawn-out thing, and I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to kind of bounce through it a little bit tonight and look into it. But as the service has been going on, I kept thinking of, the word risk and taking risks. There are people in this world they call, thrill seekers and adrenaline junkies or whatever they may want to call them, and that's what they live for, is to take a risk. I mean, the bungee jumpers and skydivers and I, sometimes I'll thinking to myself, I would like to go skydiving one day. And the other days I'm like, ain't no way in the world you're going to get me up on an airplane. Some days maybe I'm willing to take that risk, and some days I'm not. Most of the time I'm the type of person, I don't like to take risks. Getting ready for Sunday school this morning, I went to get my toothbrush, and it had been moved to the other side of the sink. And the very first thing that hit my mind was somebody has mistakenly used my toothbrush. So I kind of felt, hey, I can take the risk and go ahead and use it. I got it, touched it, it was dry. I was like, yeah, but it's still awful weird. I always put it on the right-hand side of the sink, and now it's over on the left side. So I know there's several new toothbrushes under the sink, so there's no sense of me taking the risk on using this one. So I threw it in the trash can, and I got a new one because I just didn't want to take that risk. Me and Sister Sheena have been sitting in an office with a car salesman and talking and discussing and going back and forth, and then we kind of get down to the last call, to the decision time, and me and her begin to talk amongst the two of us and just kind of figuring out what we're going to do. And the poor man on the other side of the desk, he's over there, he's just letting us know, I think y'all can do it. I think y'all can handle it. And I'm thinking, well, the thing is, buddy, the risk that we're maybe about to take has nothing to do with you. Because the fact is whether or not I'm ever able to actually make a payment on this thing or not, and it get repossessed or not, doesn't matter to you. You still get your commission no matter what. Right. So really, he was not as invested into anything as I was. I had taken up a few minutes of his time doing paperwork, and that's the only thing he had invested into what we were attempting to work on. And it kind of, you look at the differences that, and I know there's been cartoon skits and different things done it, comparing the, dedication and things between a chicken and a pig. The chicken, gives eggs and lays the eggs, and it gets the eggs, but the pig, poor thing, has to give everything to provide what we get from it. But with taking risks, when God is in the situation and you're doing what God's told you to do, we talked about burdens this morning, and maybe I'm piggybacking off of that. If God is in it, it's not a risk. It might feel like a risk. But if God's in it, it's not a risk, it's a certainty. What God says is going to happen will happen. The way you're going to fare in a situation, if God tells you what's going to happen in it, it's how it's going to happen. But if you want to go ahead and turn your Bibles, one I'm mostly going to read out of is Acts chapter 27. And I'm a handful of scriptures out of 28, but 27 and 9 is what I'm going to start at. Paul is in a situation here that we all feel like we've been in, and it's just kind of several things I want to look at. And he's been arrested a chapter or two behind this. I didn't really look into it to figure out exactly where, but he's been arrested, and he's on his way in to see someone else at this point, and that's never could have been a very good place to be in. And now we're seeing in these first few scriptures that we're going to read, the storm has begun to kind of build up. And they, knowing that they're not in a good situation right here in this point in time. And I don't know where they get the idea from, but they're saying that one thing that had this whole situation in such a turmoil was the time of year. Back in these days, sailors, at nighttime, they told direction by the stars. During the daytime, they told direction by the time of day and the sun. and they had to use all those different things to calculate and figure out where they're going to go. Well, if it's really, really cloudy and you can't see the sky, it's nearly impossible, if at all, to tell which direction that you're going. So by wintertime, you didn't sail. If you were happened to be out on a ship and you were trying to get somewhere and that time of year come around, you found an island to sit somewhere for the entire winter. And you stayed there until it got better. And they're claiming that this all happened in the month of October. Where they got that from, I don't know. But that's why the situation happened the way that it was. Because it says that by September, or by November, there was hardly any sailing at all going on. So they're right there at the deadline. So they kind of knew that they were going out into some sketchy situations with the weather, but they needed to leave anyway. They even get into one point in time in this chapter where Paul kind of tries to hint to him as a prisoner, we might need to just hang out right here for a little while. And we'll look at that in just a minute. They didn't want to listen to him. And sometimes we'll feel like we're in situations to where just like nobody will listen to us. We've got a word from God, and we're trying to spread it. We're trying to tell people about it, and sometimes it feels like you're trying to herd chickens. But we're still seeing Paul, as we can see through the rest of this tonight, he never one time changes what he was saying. He always repeated exactly what he had said beforehand. In verses 9 and 11, or 9 through 11, he says, "Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading in the ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken to Paul, and they set sail anyway." Well, what did that take them? All it does is lead them right into the storm. They had a warning right here from Paul. Something bad's going to happen on this trip. He wasn't saying we don't ever need to go. He was saying we need to hold up and just wait a second. Now in verses 21 and through 25, after a long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. Now just to add on to the situation that Paul is in, when it said that after long abstinence Paul stood forth, this study Bible I have said that that's been translated meaning after long, the fast. Paul hadn't ate in a while. He's hungry. He stood up and he's trying to tell them we shouldn't have sailed. Harm and loss is coming. "And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship." Now imagine being one of those men hearing Paul speak, and they're out there in this ship, in this storm, and he is saying, be of good cheer. Be of good cheer. This thing's about to sink. What are you talking about? "There shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God." Yes. We got to believe God in the storm. We all going through something right now. Everybody's got their own battles as an individual. Everybody's got their own storms as an individual. We've got our storms as a community. We got our storms as a church. They seem like they are always coming from one place or another, but taking note from what we're going to see tonight with this from Paul, do not waver and do not stop believing God. Don't stop like he said, whose I am. I am God's, whom I serve. I serve God. That's why the angel came and told him, everybody in the boat, now the boat's going to be lost, it's going to be out of here, but everybody here will be okay. Yep. Now, he said, howbeit we must be cast upon a certain island. Maybe he knew there was an island coming, he just didn't know which one it was. Scripture, in a little bit, these scriptures describe the people that live on that island as barbarians. But still he didn't say, hey, look, be of good cheer, it's going to be okay. We're going to go right through this storm, and when it's all over with, everyone's going to be unscathed, everything's going to be fine, but the ship's going to all be in one piece. He had to tell them what the angel told him was going to happen. Everything's going to fall apart. We're going to seem like there's no way we're going to come out of this thing, but we're going to be fine. But over in verse 30, there were some people that didn't want to believe him still. He already said, hey, look, let's don't sail right now. Let's stay here. But the centurion believed the owner and believed the captain of the ship, and they set sail. In verse 30 it says, and as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, under color as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. They kind of made it look like they were just getting anchors ready to drop in case they needed to, but they were getting one of the emergency boats out. They were fixing to leave. Paul could have sat back and let them go and said, well, that's their own decision. If they want to fall out and die, that's their prerogative. God said everybody that stays on the boat will be fine, but if they don't want to stay on it, it's their decision. But Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. Now, here's one time that they did listen to him. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, this day is the 14th day that ye have tarried and continued fasting, having taken nothing. Wherefore I pray you to take some meat, for this is for your health, for there shall not an hair fall from the head of any of you. We're all going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Let's eat something. Get your strength up because we're going to need it. Maybe Paul was knowing we're fixing to all be having to swim. We're going to have to do something. But again, over in verse 42, and after the ship begins to sink in verses 43 and 44, or before they sink, the soldiers are deciding to, hey, what we need to do is if any of these guys get escaped and anybody finds out about it, they're going to kill us or they're going to punish us or we're going to lose our job. So let's just kill all the prisoners so we don't have to worry about them. We can just worry about ourselves. You know, talk about feeling like everything's just coming against y'all at one time. Paul's on this boat, everything's falling apart, the storm's got everybody a nervous wreck. He's trying to get everybody to eat. Now they're talking about killing him and all the other prisoners, and it just seemed like there was no end in sight to the troubles that he just continues to fight with. Verse 43 says that the centurion, wiling to save Paul, kept them from their purpose and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. And the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship, and so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. I would not have liked to have been in that little meeting. If you could swim, raise your hand. Okay, all of y'all that can swim, y'all go ahead and jump off the boat and start swimming. Those of y'all that can't, wait till the boat falls apart and grab you a board that'll float or something and paddle in. I wouldn't have wanted to be there because I'd have had to be one of them ones that waited behind. I can't swim. So I'd have had to wait to find me a good piece of lumber floating around and climb up on it, maybe a crate box or something that they were toting that might float just a little while to get me over to land. But regardless of what I would have had to look for, because this was from God and God had told Paul, I'm not going to let anything happen to anybody there, these men got to see what Paul said be true. And you have to wonder, no, there's not a single scripture that says, but you have to wonder if maybe that centurion or maybe some of those other soldiers didn't think about this later on and say, you know what, that one prisoner that we had kept saying we was all going to be fine as long as we stayed on the boat. It made more sense to while the getting was good for the few of us to get on that emergency boat and get on out of here and get a little island and just hide out there until this all was over with. Maybe that made more sense at the time, but he said to stay on the boat and we'd all be okay. So we stayed on the boat and here we all are accounted for. We're all okay. So there's got to be something to this. So see, there you go again, taking an example from Paul. even in the bad situation, staying true to God and to the one that we serve, the one that we live our life for. And you know, I like how it worded that when the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose. Their purpose was to kill him. We have a purpose today that God's trying to keep us to. He's not trying to stop. The storm that we may be going through isn't from God to send you nowhere, but the winds from the storm may be what God's trying to get for us to see that where He's turning us in the direction that we need to go. Now, Paul being Paul, God could have just said, okay, Paul, after all this is over with, after you go see Caesar and everything works out like how we need it to, I need you to go back to this island out here in the middle of nowhere, and when witness to these people, there's something going on here. Paul would have done it. He would have obeyed. I fully believe that he would have obeyed. But what kind of response would he have received from the people on that island if that had been that way? Maybe God would have, it would have been a good response. Maybe it would have, but we'll see here in a little bit in verse 28, verse 1, when they were escaped, then they knew that the island was called Melita, and the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received us every one because of the present rain and because of the cold. Now, I guess they must have had some firewood stored up somewhere in a dry place, because they had a storm going on and they still got dry firewood to start a fire. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. I kind of had a, hold on top of everything else, now I'm snake bit. Monday morning when I got up to go to work last week, you know, Monday and Tuesday was our first little preview of winter time. You know, it got kind of cold those nights. And I got up and I thought, man, it's a little chilly in the house. So I walked and looked at the thermostat. It said it was 65 degrees in the house. So I turned the heat on, and it's the first time that I know of it's been turned on all year, and got that little burnt smell coming out of the vent. So I was like, okay, it's heating, it's doing good. I'll go get ready for work, and that's going to knock the chill off in a little while. When everybody else wakes up, they'll be comfortable. When I went to leave, I looked. Remember, it was 67 when I turned it on. It was 65 the next time I looked at it. And I thought, wait a minute, that's going the wrong way. So I took a couple minutes just to kind of look to see what was going on. And the only thing that you could say was, the heat ain't working. And I kind of had that thought on top of everything else that we've all got going on right now. The coldest time we've had in a long time, and now our heat's not working. So took advantage of the services available, just because with me working in time frame and different things like that, I know I could work on air conditioners, but we needed it. It was going to be cold that night. We needed it fixed right now. So we called and got some people to come out. They got it fixed, and now it's fine. Well, Paul here, on top of being taken prisoner, done went through that fast, hadn't been really eating, still probably feeling a little weak, just everything. He's probably just not feeling like his real old self right now. He's got to be shipwrecked on top of all of this. Now he has been snake bit by not just anything. He has been bit by a venomous snake, because verse 4 says that when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hang on his hand, they said among themselves, no doubt this man's a murderer, whom though he hath escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffereth not to live. You know, they're superstitious, and they're saying, well, he didn't die in the shipwreck, so, you know, karma's getting him some other kind of way. But he shook off the beast into the fire and felt no harm. Howbeit they looked, when he should have swollen, you know, yeah, he's still standing there, but I bet you his hand's as big as a football. And they began to look, and they said, well, he ain't swollen. He hadn't fallen down dead suddenly. But after they had looked a great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and decided that he was a god. In the same quarters were possessions of the chief man of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and lodged us 3 days courteously. And it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and of a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. Would Paul have ever gotten that opportunity at that time on that island to heal this man if he hadn't went through everything he went through previously? Would they have ever allowed Paul to step foot in that man's house and pray for him had they not themselves witnessed Paul get snake bit? If they hadn't seen the things that he had done, this wouldn't have, because it goes on to say that not only this, as verse 9 says, so when this was done, others also which had diseases in the island came and were healed. Paul was able to be in a position and a place to not only help this man's daddy, but help other people on the island of a sickness, and God healed them using Paul only because of what Paul had went through. So sometimes even when things seem like they're kicking back and things aren't working right and things aren't exactly lining up the way that maybe they were supposed to, doesn't mean everything's going to be failure. Those are still the things that God is using to put you where He needs you. The winds may blow a little differently than what we want them. Things aren't always going to go the way that we plan. And it's maybe sometimes it might not be because of the different interferences. It may not exactly be what God was feeling like we were saying God was wanting us to do. But we say, okay, no matter what, in the storm, in the shipwreck, Paul still said the same thing every time. Stay on the boat. Like I said, when those guys started to step off the boat, he could have surely said, well, if it ain't none about business, I gave them the message. I said stay on the boat. They want to leave. They can leave. I ain't in it. They can do what they want. They all grown men. They can do what they want to do. But he still once again reiterated, stay on the ship. Like I said, we're in a storm now. Everybody's got personal things going on. Stay on the boat. Yes. Stay on course with God. Don't let things happen. It feels like Paul was trying to still do a work. He's trying to help build the fire. And the snake bit him. He didn't know how. He just shook it back off into the fire. He didn't stop and say, well, I got to quit. I can't keep working. I've been snake bit. He continued on with what he was doing. The whole time people were looking at him and expecting him to fall over, that was God putting something in their eyes to see, well, wait a minute, there's something to this man. Now, in their superstition and in their own religions that they must have had, they went the wrong way with it and was thinking that he was some kind of God on his own, and it gave Paul another opportunity. I know it's not written right here in any scriptures, but I don't believe Paul went on letting these people think he was a God. But I guarantee you, he told them who God was. Yes. Never forget the worst battles, the worst storms that we may go through. Somebody could be watching us go through them. Somebody may see that snake jump up and bite you on that hand. But it might be what God needs us to have in our arsenal to use to witness to somebody. Yes. To be what God can use to, hey, not even witness, but the man was healed. The people were healed because Paul, there's no scripture of Paul's ever saying, oh, well, I just give up every time I turn. Everywhere I try to go, everything falls apart. I tried to help this one and it just flat happened, went the wrong way. I tried to go over here and got slapped in the face. I tried to go this way and I hit a brick wall. Nothing will line up right. Nothing will go the way that I need it to. It just seems like everything's happening. You know, it kind of gets frustrating. You know, we tried to do that whole thing for the month of October where we was wanting to do a visitor drive. You know, everybody bring a visitor for the month of October. And then COVID hit us and we didn't have services for most of October, and it kind of felt discouraging, or it did to me. And I kind of was like, well, Lord, what in the world's going on? We were trying to get more people in. Now we happen to shut it down. It went the other direction. What's going on? But I'm still planning. I'm still and wanting to do the what I had talked about a few weeks ago with later on, first of the year, by March, somewhere right before Easter maybe, doing some kind of community outreach of some kind. I may have to downplay it. We may have to do it differently than what I originally thought. But we don't know. Day to day, we don't know what's happening. And it just seems like we're like that ship. Now, when it says in the scriptures that storm got so bad, trying to hold on to that steering wheel and try to get any kind of, they couldn't even tell where they were going. You couldn't see the stars, you couldn't see the sun during the daytime. So they just let go and they just let her go. That's the way the scripture said. They let the wind and the water take that ship just wherever it wanted to go. They were just at the mercy of the elements. No one knew where they were going. Nobody knew what direction they were going. There was just absolutely no way to control it. Your life, whether we want to admit it or not, there is absolutely no way that I can control my life. There's no way that you can control your life. You have to have it in God's hands. Because God is the one putting everything into place so that we can fully live and serve Him. Now, like we said this morning, when He gives you a burden, He doesn't just leave you cast out into the middle of nowhere to where nothing can ever happen. If you just all of a sudden wake up one day and decide you want to be a missionary to Timbuktu, so you have to go running around making phone calls and knocking on doors, begging people for enough money so you can buy a plane ticket to go to Timbuktu to be a missionary, maybe that's because God hasn't called you to be a missionary in Timbuktu. He's going to provide the way before, and everything will fall into place. So when God is in it, Paul was not taking any kind of a risk when he began to tell these people stay on the boat. He wasn't taking we're not taking a risk when God is in the equation. When God's in it and He's the one leading, if we're serving Him, and He's who we are believing in, like Paul said, it's not a risk. I hope that this was something said tonight. I'm going to close with that and hope everybody has a good week. We'll definitely be praying for everybody again, like we said, for everybody. Keep praying for Brother Ray, still doing good. We will be remembering Brother Charles tomorrow while he has his procedure done. We'll ask everybody if we would, let's all stand, and I'll ask Brother Larry if he'll dismiss us with prayer.
Jesus, thank you, Lord, for the service, and thank you for the answer. Lord, I thank you for the word of God. Lord, bless those